Good morning, everyone. I'm Tiffany, and welcome to the webinar on Post-COVID-19 Business Updates and Outlook in Malaysia, organized by Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And our partners for this webinar for today is MIDA and Maybank. Well, we have more than 200 people on this webinar together with us today, and I'm pleased to announce that we have also 6 key council members of SCCCI attending this session with us too. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Vice President of Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Kwa Boon Wee, to say a few words to kickstart off this webinar. So VP Kwa, please.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar. I must apologize for my president not being able to join us as planned. As you know, we had a big announcement yesterday, and everyone is kind of scrambling as the time allocated is quite short. On behalf of the Chamber, I welcome all of you. It's very heartening to see that we have such a strong response to this session. And it shows that many businesses are very keen to be updated on the latest development and opportunities in Malaysia. Singapore and Malaysia have very close and long-standing trade and investment ties. Traditionally, Malaysia has been a top overseas market of interest to Singapore businesses. Malaysia has always been an attractive market with good economic fundamentals and for Singapore businesses. Malaysia's diversified economy presents business opportunities in many sectors. COVID-19 has severely impacted our economy and business environment. And to help revive its economy, Malaysia has also rolled out economic stimulus packages of close to 300 billion ringgit. And with some of the measures specifically aimed at attracting foreign direct investment. As COVID-19 restrictions ease, Singapore and Malaysia are set to open their economies further. In fact, for Singapore businesses, if we cannot fly, we pretty much can only look towards Malaysia for regional expansion. For many businesses at the moment, top of their challenge is when do we start traveling again? We know that from public announcements that both countries are in active discussions to allow Malaysians to resume travel into Singapore to work, number of people allowed to enter, the procedures to follow, and the businesses that will get priority are all being discussed. Quite confident that traveling will resume, but of course it will be carried out in a controlled and safe manner. This morning, we're delighted to have a very distinguished panel of speakers who will be sharing with us their perspectives and insights into the latest developments in Malaysia and Johor. I urge of you to participate actively and ask questions. Last but not least, I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to our webinar sponsor, Maybank, in partnering with the Chamber to make this event possible. I wish everyone a fruitful, healthy, and productive session ahead. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you, VP Kwa. So now let us call upon our first speaker for today, Mr. Chua Hak Ping, Senior Economist, Macro Thematic of Maybank Kim An. He will share more about the economic and business outlook of Malaysia in the second half of 2020. So over to you, Hak Ping.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Mr. Kwa. Thanks for the opportunity to present on the Malaysian economic outlook. I'm an economist sitting here in Singapore, and I'll share some views about ASEAN and Malaysia. Let me just try to share the screen so you can see some of the slides. No surprise, Malaysia is also affected by the COVID, and it will be falling into a recession. The movement control order has quite an impact, so we're looking at a -3.3% this year and a recovery next year. Just to give a sense on the sectors that have been hit, I think for many of the countries, it's quite similar. In Malaysia, construction is hit, agriculture as well. I think, and then with some shortage of foreign workers, but also a lot of the services related industries, which involves face-to-face contact. So you can see, real estate, transport, storage, accommodation, all this other have also been hit quite badly. But this is only for the first quarter, so it actually doesn't capture the full brunt of the second quarter when the lockdown really happened. So I think from that you can expect a lot of the services, including retail, trade, food and beverage, to collapse quite a bit. But I think what's encouraging is that Malaysia is doing pretty well in terms of containing the pandemic curve. So this is the latest update that we have, and at least the number of cases have fallen quite a bit and actually faster than what Singapore has been doing. The more worrying case within ASEAN is really Indonesia and the Philippines, where the number of cases are still fairly high, and yet I think the governments are still rushing to ease the lockdown. So there is some fears of a second wave. I'm just highlighting historically, when you look back, the Spanish flu in 1918 spent about 2 years, killed 50 to 100 million people. Thankfully, this COVID is not as bad as the Spanish flu, but still, it was the second wave that really killed a lot more people then. So I think, we all have to accept that the virus is going to be with us for the next year or so, or maybe 2 years, and that this risk remains quite real. In terms of the stringency of the lockdowns, this is an Oxford index, which allows for some kind of cross-country comparisons. And you can see that Malaysia had a lockdown for roughly about 2 months, so now it's eased, so it's gone up the rankings, and it's much a bit more relaxed now compared to India, Singapore, Philippines, and even China has tightened recently because of that recent outbreak in Beijing. I think the lockdown was necessary, but actually relatively short, compared to actually the ones in the Philippines and Singapore, when you look at the bar and the duration of that red line. What about the size of the fiscal package? The government has come out quite aggressively. When you look at the totality, Malaysia's package actually looks comparable and as large as Singapore, so it's close to 20% of GDP, putting in line with some of the advanced economies. Packages in Japan and Germany have been humongous. Some of the poorer countries are actually at the bottom, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, didn't have the fiscal resources and the room to respond. But probably important to highlight for Malaysia's case, not all of it came from the government's pockets. Not all came from the federal government's balance sheet. Some of the numbers that's included here is like a loan moratorium, which is an arrangement done with essentially Bank Negara. And also there was also the support that came from the EPF, allowing Malaysians to withdraw money from their own pension savings, which also means that in the future they would have actually less pensions. Comparatively in Singapore, we didn't make any changes to allow for early withdrawal from the CPF. So in this table, we just try to break down that fiscal package that was provided by Malaysia and the other countries in terms of the direct handout, how much of it went to businesses, how much went to households, how much came from non-budget stimulus, like the EPF example. And I think we would probably rank Malaysia roughly in fourth when you look at the package that comes directly from the government's coffers. And the fiscal impulse is not as much. Well, in part because Malaysia has a fiscal deficit. Malaysia was already, having to deal with the issues led by 1MDB and the fairly, high public debt. So it didn't have the fiscal reserves to provide. But still, I think a lot has been done, and I think that will help to cushion the impact. These are the details. When you look at the components, it's quite similar to many other countries, including some of the wage subsidy programs. Not as generous as Singapore, but there was that package, that 5.3 billion. There was reskilling programs. There was loan support for the SMEs as well. And then more recently, there's stuff to stimulate home ownership, a temporary waiver of the tax exemption for car sales, and car sales are now shooting up. And also, I think as MIDA will point out, lots of incentives for the relocation of foreign direct investments into Malaysia. So I think that is something to look at closely at, because it's 10 to 15 years possibly tax-free if you qualify for sort of new manufacturing investments. This just gives more details if you need to run through. I think one of the points that we make is that the hit on the economic recession is less from the virus, is more because of the lockdowns, that many countries have been forced to impose. So in some sense, policymakers have had to make a trade-off. Do you accept higher deaths and higher fatality rate, but you can carry on with economic life? And this just makes the point that when you look at the first quarter growth, I think the lockdowns were really responsible for about 3/4 of the economic contraction. So now that the lockdowns are lifted and eased, life is resuming, and I think some of the economic activities will pick up. So growth in the third quarter in June for Malaysia and the fourth quarter should gradually normalize. But of course, it's not even across different sectors. The sectors that will still continue to struggle will be the ones that depend on tourism, the ones that depend on air travel. Sort of hotels will find it harder, and especially for those who involve large numbers of people, sort of recreation sectors, the conventions or concerts. So there is that small part of the economy that still probably cannot recover very well. This just gives a sense of the pandemic economy, as I described. We've passed the trough, we've passed the worst of the pandemic crisis. We are in the recovery phase. But I guess the question is, for the last part, until a vaccine is widely available, we probably cannot fully recover back to the pre-COVID levels. So hopefully by sometime in the middle of next year, we will get a vaccine. I just wanted to highlight where Malaysia stands relative to the lockdowns and easings. And this is using the Apple Mobility Index. So it's from your handphone, when you download that map to see where you're going. It tracks whether you're going to the shops, whether you're going to office, whether you're going to the parks, and whether you're driving or whether you're taking the public transport. And so this gives a sense where Malaysia is. Malaysia started easing a bit earlier, 4th May. It was the third after Vietnam and Thailand, subsequently followed by Philippines, Singapore 2nd June, but we only moved into phase 1. And of course, more recently into phase 2. So Malaysia is actually having, in terms of the mobility index, people are basically back to normal. You see here on Malaysia on top, people are driving again in Malaysia, traffic jams are back. And so I think that's quite an impressive and stunning recovery on the part of Malaysia. Singapore, we hopefully is picking up, but it's not fully captured yet. But I think there's a sign that Singapore is still below Indonesia, but it's tracking up, up 20-30% in the last week or so with phase 2. On Malaysia, you can see some of the recovery. Malaysia as a whole seems to be recovering a lot faster than cities, KL, JB, and you can see that people are more or less driving and heading towards more to their offices, which is the yellow line, and also the driving to retail and recreation is also covering, and for the transit stations, it tends to be a bit slower than cars. People tend to be more comfortable now driving their own car if possible, rather than taking the public transport. So one of the issues about Malaysia is the relatively wide fiscal deficit, and of course, no surprise that with the fiscal package that's been, the 4th package as well, and the sizable number, that fiscal deficit will again widen considerably. We're forecasting about minus 6.3% of GDP. The government's looking at around 6%. So that brings us very close to the deficit levels that you see during the global financial crisis, as you can see on the map. So I think new finance minister has come to say that it'll probably take another 3 to 4 years to bring it back down to about 3%. So I think that fiscal constraint is going to be pretty tight. The government may have to find new taxes. It may have to bring back the GST in Malaysia. So something to bear in mind. As you can see, the public debt is very close to the debt ceiling. Malaysia has a self-imposed public debt ceiling of about 55% GDP. I think there's a good chance that we probably might breach it. But relative to other countries, I think that's still relatively low. When you look at European countries and all that, they're close to 100%, and for many countries like Italy and Spain and so on, they're 130, 140% of GDP. So I'm not that worried about the public debt. The quasi-public debt includes all the government guarantees in Malaysia, and of course, that number is rising. So there's also a lot of these contingent liabilities that I think Malaysia will have to deal with. Unemployment rate is spiking up. No surprise. So this chart is quite dramatic. It's now about 5%, and yet the number is probably going to go up because this is only for April, right? Because the MCO and all that is going to make the numbers jump up even dramatically. We've been seeing now some dramatic numbers in the US. It's close to 13, 14%. The Philippines went up to 17.7%. Singapore, hopefully we're looking at 4.5%, a jump, not as bad as the other countries, but still quite high for Singapore standards. You can see some of the job losses again, this is the first quarter, quite dramatic in the manufacturing, quite dramatic in the food and beverage, and yet the second quarter job losses will probably be worse than this. Exports has been struggling, because of the supply side disruptions. Unlike Singapore, Malaysia had also tightened for some of the manufacturing side of the factory, so they were allowed to operate at roughly about 50% capacity, whereas in Singapore, a lot of the manufacturing most of it was regarded as essential service, so they actually continue to operate at full. But no, in Malaysia, that's now been fully restored, and I think we're expecting a recovery in the export numbers. Some of the sectors have been doing well in terms of exports in Malaysia. But this is only up to April. The rubber gloves, of course, as you probably know, Malaysia is one of the top global glove exporters in the world. Electronics and chips is doing quite well. Again, the likes of Intel and Micron also have factories in Penang, aircrafts and palm kernel cakes all doing decently. But there's been a plunge in cars, jewelry, cotton, and timber. Malaysia is also very dependent on the oil side of the equation, so it is a net energy exporters. It actually exports more natural gas. It's actually an oil importer for now, but a lot of revenue from the fiscal side, as much as about almost 15-20% hinges on oil royalties and Petronas dividends and so on. So it's very sensitive to how oil prices behave. The good news is that at least oil prices have been recovering from the lows, and I think with world easing lockdowns, I think we can believe that the oil and energy demand will slowly creep back up. This is just to elaborate on the dependency on Petronas and dividends and so on. And of course, there's some issues now with Petronas because there's pressure from the state of Sarawak for a higher sales tax. So you could see Petronas having to pay Sarawak about 2 billion ringgit in addition each year, which again also begs the question whether the state of Sabah and all that will also pressure Petronas for more payouts. The good news is as well, I think from the business side, Bank Negara has been cutting interest rates. It's down to 2%. So I think generally you've been seeing a fall down in financing rate and mortgage rates and so on. So that will probably help ease some of the debt servicing costs. This captures some of the plunge in property price sales as well as car sales in the first quarter. There is signs of a rebound, especially for the car side as the lockdowns are eased. So these numbers will come back. I think across the world, we're seeing some kind of comeback as well, generally for durable goods. So I won't be surprised even for Singapore, there could be there's some pent-up demand, and there will be a pickup in sales of cars and property as well. And of course, the financing rates, the lower financing rates, will help some of the sales. But still bear in mind that we think that there is an issue that there is excess supply that's going to weigh on the market for property in Malaysia, particularly for commercial as well as residential, and also to some extent the retail as well. It's only probably the industrial that's doing quite well, logistics, demand, and so on, in that space. I just want to give you a sense also about the US-China trade war. Now everybody stopped talking about it, but yesterday we had an inkling that it might flare back again. That some of the tariffs that the US has imposed on China has led to some diversion of the demand towards ASEAN. Vietnam is a big beneficiary of that, but ASEAN generally saw a big surge, 26% of the stuff, of the goods that the US has imposed that tariff rate, 25% on a lot of stuff. Not totally, because there was a trade deal, so a lot of stuff like Apple products and all that are still not caught yet. But it's something to watch. Malaysia was also benefiting from the stuff that China imposed tariffs on the US, including some of the energy stuff and all that. But of course now, because of the MCO, the lockdown, that imports has been affected. This table gives you just a bit more details, but it was quite impressive that in the first 4 months of this year, the stuff that the US has imposed tariffs on, Malaysia still managed to expand those exports by 15%, despite some impact that we saw in April. Again, just to give into context, how bad is this recession relative to history for Malaysia? It's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as the Asian financial crisis, where Malaysia's GDP contracted by 7.4%. It's worse than the GFC. It's worse than the US tech recession. And that's in part because, well, it's more than just an external demand shock. It's really because of the MCO that all the domestic services were also basically shut down, right? You couldn't operate. And so that affected a large portion of the economy that is usually quite resilient to external shock. But again, with the lockdowns being eased, there should be a decent rebound. Malaysia is also dependent on tourism, and that will be affected. The good news is that 50% of the tourism market is domestic tourism. So the international flights may be remain pretty tight, but at least they have a domestic market to help to fill up some of the rooms and hotels and provide some kind of lifeline to the the AirAsia and Malaysian Airlines within the country. They are short haul flights, but again, this will be the toughest part of the recovery, I think. This just gives a sense of the foreign direct investments coming into Malaysia and how's it doing compared to the other countries. I think the story is that with the trade war, more of the MNCs are looking to shift some of their factories abroad. So I think more increasingly, especially now with the pandemic, more want a resilient supply chain, right? So I think we'll see a China plus one kind of strategy, and where's that one? And so I think Malaysia has a chance of being featured. I think most of the data would show, Philippines, Vietnam is doing pretty well, and then second will be probably Malaysia and Thailand. Singapore appeals to a very different space, very capital intensive and less labor intensive kind of investments. Philippines, somewhat. Indonesia was a disappointment actually all the way until last year. There is a bit of pickup in the first quarter, but I think but it'll be interesting to see whether Indonesia can pick up. But so Malaysia is actually doing a pretty good job so far, I think, in attracting foreign investments. So total approval did fall. I think I'll let MIDA elaborate on details, but I think a lot of the investments now is coming from electronics, which was double that last year from the 2018 levels. The fall last year was really because of the petroleum, refineries and products investments. Penang is a star in terms of attracting FDI. It jumped, as you can see from the chart, quite dramatically, and I presume that it's still going to be quite a big favorite in terms of attracting FDI. Okay, this gives you more details if you want, but a lot of investments are also going into the services area, finance, insurance, other services, and not just manufacturing. China is also becoming a feature, and China has become a bigger investor into Malaysia as well. So that's something to watch. There was some pullback because with the change of government, a lot of the big infrastructure projects were kind of put on hold for a while, but I think that seems to be slowly being settled. So I think some of the contracts will probably like the East Corridor, going to the East Coast. But I think that's slowly coming back. China is also a big source of tech investments, increasing into ASEAN. So I think, and alongside with Singapore, so that is also showing up in many other places, especially as e-commerce takes off. And because the US and Europe is basically putting up the barriers, to China investments, they're scrutinizing it very closely. So I think you're going to see that diversion of China tech investments also into ASEAN and Malaysia. On a lighter note, this is the applications of My Second Home. In case you want a second home in Malaysia, the numbers have been decent. China accounts for a pretty big part of it. I don't have the 2019 data, but for Singapore, it kind of eased off in 2018, but it accounts for about 2% of the total applications. So I think in summary, I think looking at Malaysia, it successfully flattened the pandemic curve. Did pretty well. It was the third country within ASEAN to ease, and now the economy is reopening. We see the mobility index recovering quite quickly, so it's back to almost to life as usual. I think business can restart again. Again, our point is that the COVID crisis, as well as the trade war and the tech war, is going to drive the supply chain shift. MNCs are going to reconfigure and adopt a more diversified strategy. And I think Malaysia has a chance to feature in that. They will be adopting a China Plus One. Important that Malaysia features in a Plus One. There has been general fiscal incentives to try to cushion the impact from the pandemic, but also to attract FDI. And I think MIDA will go through some details. The rising fiscal deficit and debt, while a worry, also means that actually they need more foreign investments. They need other forms of investments, whether it's portfolio, whether it's FDI. So I think that makes it even more important. And they will be putting out the carpet, for investments from Singapore. Again, very low interest rates and ample liquidity in the system also means that the financing costs also could be quite low. There are risks, of course, in Malaysia. There has been a lot of leadership changes, and I think the politics side is still in a bit of a flux. The rising fiscal deficit could lead to higher new taxes or tax hikes in the future. The household debt is still pretty high, which also will weigh on the property market. Also, high household debt in Malaysia is close to 83% of GDP. Comparatively, Singapore is about 70%. There is excess property supply, residential, commercial, but it could be good in terms of investing into Malaysia. I think I'll stop there and happy to take questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Haping. Thank you for the presentation. So next up, we will have Ms. Umarani Muniandi, Councillor of the High Commission of Malaysia. She'll be talking about the investments opportunities and updates of the Malaysia government key focus and initiatives. So Umarani, please.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, so everything is all good?
Good. Thanks for the introduction, Tiffany. Can you all hear me?
Yes, not a problem. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the kind introduction, Tiffany. A very good morning to everyone. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank SCCCI for putting this webinar together and giving MIDA an opportunity to share information on MIDA itself, the organization that I'm representing, and on the investment opportunities in Malaysia and the impact of COVID on some of the sectors and the measures taken by the government to cushion the impact in the midterm, long term, and short term, and also some interesting news about how we are embracing Industry 4.0 in Malaysia. So I'll start with MIDA. For those of you who are familiar or those of you who are not familiar, we are the first point of contact for investors. And we have been established in 1967 as the principal government agency to attract investments into the manufacturing and services sector. And we are under the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. And we have 20 overseas offices and 12 state offices. And I'm Uma. I'm currently heading the Singapore office in MIDA. I'm in Suntec Tower 1. So please pay us a visit when it's time, when the lockdown eases. And I also have my LinkedIn address here for some of you who would, because I do post on informations and news on investments in Malaysia. Okay, I would like to just take you through the organization structure in MIDA, how we are structured, so that you would understand how we do this. We do the promotion of investment in Malaysia. We have dedicated teams promoting investment, foreign direct investments and domestic direct investments back in HQ who work with the overseas office. So mainly, primarily this team will be targeting companies in the manufacturing and services into Malaysia. And once this application comes to MIDA, it goes to various teams in the manufacturing and services sector for evaluation and approval of projects. So the evaluation is done on manufacturing license, tax incentives, expatriate posts, and so on. So the industry talent management team will be doing the evaluation and approval for expatriate posts. And this talent management team has got, you see, talent is an important factor for any investors. So back about 6 years ago, we formed this team, and this team is also responsible for addressing the talent issues of investors. So besides evaluating applications for expatriate posts, they also have programs and they provide the platform for the vocational schools to work with the industry players even while they are studying. They have industry skills councils, so various programs like job fair, and they also collect resumes of talents in Malaysia, so to assist. So I would urge you to utilize this facility in Malaysia. Okay, at implementation stage, an investor would be assisted by our various state officers because they have good connections with the state authorities in each of the states they are positioned. And another important factor for an investor would be getting the raw material and machinery. So we have a team which evaluates and approves customs duty exemption. So some of you might have heard of free zone areas in Malaysia. So such companies which are in free zone areas do not come to MIDA for this assistance on evaluation. Whereas for those with LMW status also, you get direct customs facilitation from the Royal Customs of Malaysia. But otherwise, this team will help you, the tariff team will help you in MIDA. And we have a team which handles compliance of approving conditions, and this team works in a consultative manner to ensure that you enjoy the tax incentive that is approved. And we also have another important team, facilitation team, and this team takes effect after you have implemented the project. So basically you see end to end, they are there to assist. And this post-investment team, they have structured themselves to have specialists on issues. So there will be an officer who's well-versed on utility issues. There'll be another officer who will be well-versed in issues on customs or matters on halal and so on. So this is how we are functioning. And on top of this, we also act as a one-stop agency where we have representatives of important stakeholders like customs, immigrations, telecommunication, and also from Labor Department housed within MIDA. And another facilitation that I would like to mention here is about the expatriate approvals. When we give the expatriate approvals, companies who get these letters, they did not go to Putrajaya Immigration HQ, because we have at level 17 housed within MIDA, we already have an immigration unit which will issue you the employment passes. So these are all initiatives beyond the tax initiatives to assist investors. Okay, what are the options for investors in Malaysia? As an investor, if you're not ready to have a permanent presence in Malaysia, you can opt to have your rep office or regional office where the approval comes from MIDA for a period of 2 years. And we also wrap this with the expatriate post approval. You can do a lot of activities under the rep office and regional office, like you can collect information, you can study the market. You know, if you have your regional office in Malaysia, you can do it for the region, except that you can't conclude commercial transactions and you can't do trading. If you are interested in doing trading and just having an outfit, you can have sales office. Rep office and regional office are not legal entity. And the main condition that we look at is you must have at least ringgit Malaysia 300,000 of OPEX, you know, to get the status. And there are some companies who have also chosen Malaysia to be their regional hub. You see, principal hub. So if companies are having a wide range of network companies, related companies, and they want to use Malaysia to do their, you know, to centralize their key making as key functions, and if they operate as a profit center, they can opt for this principal hub status and incentive, which is quite interesting. We give about 0% tax to 5% tax from 5 years to 10 years, depending on the level of commitments. Another option for investors would be to have your production facility in Malaysia, which many companies are there already. And these companies have also expanded to have their R&D, competence center and training center. So there are many MNCs which have their training center, like Airbus has its training center there, BMW has its training center there, Altera has its technical center, B. Brown has its center of excellence in Malaysia. So, you know, many companies have opted for all this. As an investment promotion agency, Malaysia targets quality investments, and the indicators for quality investments in Malaysia are mainly, you know, we are looking for high value added products, high tech products, projects which can have a strong linkage with our domestic industry, capital intensive projects, high income jobs, R&D, design, you know, these are some of the indicators that we look at. And for good projects, we offer tax incentives, and we have a list of promoted activities. And the tax incentives, the main, I'm just going to mention the main tax incentives here. The main tax incentives that we have are, one is the pioneer status, that's the income tax exemption ranging from 70% or 100% for a period of 5 or 10 years. And the other one is investment capital allowance, where a company can offset 60% or 100% of its qualifying capital expenditure incurred within 5 years. This can be done until they have utilized the qualifying capital expenditure. So these are the main incentives that we have, and upon expiring the incentive, companies can also avail themselves to reinvestment allowance, which is at 60% on qualifying capital expenditure incurred for 15 consecutive years. And this is given by Inland Revenue. Well, while our pioneer status and investment tax allowance are on project base, reinvestment allowance is given to the company itself. So the entire statutory income of the company will be used to offset this, you see. So that's quite interesting. And beyond that, for very selected companies on one-to-one basis, we also customize packaged investment incentives. And with this package, we also give some, we also consider grants, you know, for good projects. You know, there are 2 grants here that I have mentioned. So one of it is Domestic Investment Strategic Fund, mainly for companies which has got 60% local equity, and the High Impact Fund is available for 100% foreign equity, and we consider R&D and training for this. Okay, so having said that, many companies have enjoyed tax-free environment, or maybe paying minimal tax, you know, in Malaysia for a period of 20 to 25 years. And some tax incentives are much more interesting in terms of quantum or the period where it's given on regional basis. So, you know, so for Northern Corridor, for Eastern Corridor, and so on, you will see that these IPAs will come to you and say that, oh, you can enjoy for more than 10 years, you know, 10 plus 5 and so on. Okay, I'll touch a bit on investment opportunities in Malaysia. Dr. Chua has mentioned a lot on the economy in Malaysia, so I'll just touch a bit on this. Over here, the chart here shows that we have been approving quite a lot of investment in the economy over the years. And for the past 4 years, it has been in the range of USD 50 billion. And most of the investment comes in the services manufacturing sector. One important point that I would like to make here is these are approved investment, and about 60% of the approved investments in Malaysia are for reinvestment. So it goes to show that how comfortable these companies are in Malaysia, that they continue expanding their operations in Malaysia. Well, Malaysia is an ideal global supply chain hub. Why? Because we have the advantage of strong E&E base, and we have established local engineering supporting cluster, and we have the talented workforce. So that's why we have been targeting high value added investments in E&E, automotive, machinery, chemical, and so on. And we are also trying to strengthen the services sector in Malaysia. and promote non-equity mode investments, because we have a lot of capabilities in areas like contract manufacturing, outsourcing, and so on. And we also encourage joint venture partnership, because some of the incentives or grant scheme have this 60% condition. So if you come in and on a win-win situation where you have the technology and over there they have the ability to roll out the project, please do consider. Okay, what are the major industries in Malaysia? The major industries in Malaysia are mainly E&E industry, machinery and equipment industry, medical device industry, aerospace. Petrochemical is also one of our major industries. So how we see this, like E&E, as mentioned by Dr. Chua, actually most of our total approved investments are from E&E, except that the past few years, it was coming from petrochemical, mainly domestic investments by Petronas in Pengerang. And as for the machinery and equipment sector, we have one of the largest and strongest M&E industry where in ASEAN, and it's dominated by SMEs. And medical device, we started off with rubber-based, as mentioned by Dr. Chua. We started off with rubber glove, and until now we are we are taking a market share of about 65% of rubber gloves of the world. But the past 10 to 15 years, we have attracted many MNCs, about 30 medical devices MNCs, who are producing high value added medical devices in Malaysia. And similarly, the same story goes to aerospace industry, where we have a strong MRO support with more than 230 local and global companies calling Malaysia their home. So all this is actually factors which has ranked Malaysia as 8th in terms of exports of high-tech products in 2018. And manufacturing contributes about 85% of our total exports for the month of January to April. And our strategic location between India and China and being the hub in ASEAN also helps a lot. Okay, these are some of the strong engineering support industry in Malaysia. So if you have intentions to come to Malaysia, do not hesitate of getting the support from the engineering side on mold and die, metal casting, machining. We have ample companies who are doing this for the MNCs, so they have these required capabilities. Well, as for approved investments in the manufacturing sector, this is for 2019. Just to give you an idea, we received the top investment came in total, it came from China, followed by USA, and Singapore is our third largest investor in 2019. And as for realized investments that in the manufacturing sector for years 1980 to 2019. As for the countries cumulative, we find that Japan has implemented most of the approved projects, followed by USA, and Singapore is still the third. So Singapore is always an important investment country for us, important investor for us. Okay, as for implemented projects, these are just to show you as of 31st December 2019, we have investment about USD 15 billion from Singapore for 3,000 over projects in the manufacturing, 100 over projects in the services, providing job employments about 300 to 400,000. And the manufacturing companies, among others, are those in the slide here. And interesting to note that the MNCs who are based in Singapore also look at Malaysia for their expansion, like Micron, Samsung, Ibidin, and so on. And some services projects from Singapore has also been located in Malaysia in healthcare, education, and so on. And we have the Singapore banks, UOB, and we have signed the MOU, MIDA, with UOB to attract investments into Malaysia. Okay, this over 5,000 companies from more than 50 countries have established their manufacturing companies in Malaysia, and these are some of the prominent ones. We have many others too. And these companies, some of them have expanded to have their regional and global operations. About 900, 800 projects from 100 countries have set up their regional operations in Malaysia. Okay, over here, I'll just highlight, I'll leave the slide with you, but generally just like to highlight that in terms of ease of doing business by World Bank, we rank number 2 after Singapore in these 5 countries in ASEAN. And we have a reasonable price for electricity. Our internet speed, there's a lot of measures by government. There's a lot of room for improvement. So last budget, government has allocated a good amount of money, and they are going to roll out this plan to improve the connectivity in 5 phases, and first phase was already rolled out. Okay, further cost comparisons on average office rent, I'd like to take your attention here. You would notice that the major cities in these 5 countries, Kuala Lumpur is having one of the lowest rate in terms of office rental, and the same goes to industrial land. And this slide here shows the levy for foreign workers for some of you who might be interested. So I've put this slide here, and in Sing dollar, it comes to, for manufacturers and construction, it will cost you about 700 Sing dollar per employee. Okay. So we have a business-friendly investment policy in Malaysia where we allow 100% equity ownership for foreigners in the manufacturing. Actually, we have liberalized this since 2004. So you won't be imposed any conditions in your manufacturing license, and some selected sectors, services sectors, we have liberalized about 49 services sectors, and we are in the midst of liberalizing more sectors. And there's a freedom to repatriate your capital, interest, dividends, and profits without any restrictions. And we also facilitate with employment of expatriates wherever you need the skills and competencies. So we give key posts and term posts. Key posts are permanently filled by the foreigners as long as the project is in Malaysia, and term post is given for a period of 1, 5, or 10 years. Okay, as for the intellectual property protection, I would like to let you know that our IP laws are in conformance with international standards, as we are the member of WIPO and we have signed Paris Convention Bern. And Malaysia has also signed investment guarantee agreements with more than 60 countries. So here we come to the popular topic, not unpopular topic, COVID. I think Dr. Chua has taken a very broad overview, which has told the entire story about the impact that COVID had on the Malaysian economy. And not only Malaysian economy, overall global economy. So the global scenario here, this chart will just briefly give you an impression of what was expected out of the world GDP based on November 2019 forecast, but how's the scenario going to change due to COVID. And if there's going to be a second wave, the scenario is going to be worse off if there's a double hit. So this is on the GDP. And on the merchandise and trade, the World Trade Organization is projecting there could be a decline between 13% to 32%, mainly because of lockdowns. So there is a pessimistic scenario, the red one here, and an optimistic scenario here. Well, as for Malaysian outlook, I think I need not go too much in detail because you already had that earlier with Dr. Chua. So, well, the first Bank Negara predicted that our GDP would be at the range of -2 to 0.5% in 2020. However, first quarter it moderated at 0.7%, and Bank Negara, the Central Bank of Malaysia, is expecting it to gradually pick up in the second half 2020. And there was a survey done by MIDA, my organization, with the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers. Despite you see, during the MCO, some sectors were allowed to operate at 50% capacity. Despite that, many of them had this is a cumulative figure where they had financial losses of 21 billion, export losses of 40 billion, and job losses of 190,000. So that's where our stimulus package came in to cushion the impact. So as you know that the government rolled out various stimulus packages, about 4, totaling 295 billion, and out of this amount, about 45 billion were direct injection of fiscal benefit, and out of this 295 billion ringgit, 110 billion was allocated for SME. So the main sectors that the government looked at were micro, SME, Bumiputra, and small businessmen initially. And we also took care of the employers. EPF came about giving this flexibility to some employers to defer their payment or restructure their employer share payment. There were monthly, these are some of the measures. There are many measures, but I'm just mentioning some of the measures here. The monthly wage subsidy we gave about for companies who suffered about 50% slash in their revenue. So the rate was about 600 to 1,200, and discounts were given on companies' monthly electricity bills, and reduction on levy on foreign workers. So mainly this is to increase the liquidity and to sustain them longer. And by the announcement of the government, about 300,000 companies gained from this assistance, and 11 million people also have gained from all the various handouts. Okay, and about the economic recovery strategy of Malaysia, it was announced on 6th June 2020. So basically there are 2 major policy documents from the government, one by the Economic Planning Unit on mid and long-term measures, and next one is on a short-term measure by the Ministry of Finance for the next 12 months. So MIDA had an important role in both these documents because we were part of the planning and the task force group, and we had put forward some of our proposals like retaining existing investments, attracting new investments, reviving domestic investments, and so on. And this turned into initiatives which I'm going to announce to you. Some of you would have read it, but I'll just take you through 6 of the 44 initiatives which are relevant for business. The first initiative that we have is to encourage foreign manufacturing companies to relocate to Malaysia. So companies who are having capital investment amount of 300 million to 500 million can be considered for tax rate of 0 for 10 years. These are for new investments in the manufacturing sector. And if the capital investment hits above Ringgit Malaysia 500 million, we can consider 15 years of 0 tax rate. And for existing companies which are interested in relocating some of their lines from overseas facilities into Malaysia, we can consider 100% investment tax allowance for a period of 5 years. And companies can start submitting their application from 1st June. We receive applications from 1st June 2020 till December 2021. And the CapEx has to be incurred 3 years from the date incentive approval has been given. And this is another initiative mainly to encourage SMEs to set up new businesses. So this is a tax treatment. In fact, it's an income tax rebate up to 20% per year for 3 years of assessment for new businesses between 1st July 2020 to 31st December 2021. And stamp duty exemptions, because we are encouraging mergers and acquisition among SMEs so that they remain strong during this trying period. So this stamp duty exemption will be given from 1st July 2020 to 30th June 2021. And earlier I had mentioned about this reinvestment allowance. So this is another initiative where for year 2020 to year 2022, even those companies who have expired their RA for 15 years and another round of special RA which was given later, you can still come back for this additional reinvestment allowance for purposes of expansion, automation, modernization, and so on. And this is a domestic initiative. So companies which have a minimum of 60% Malaysian equity will be considered second round of approval. This is a matching grant which we intend to give for companies which are intending to upgrade their technologies to penetrate the global market, to outsourcing, and also various other efforts. Okay, this non-incentive measure is an effort by MIDA, where we are going to we have set up the platform. It's an e-platform to give fast-track approval for investment projects for all non-sensitive manufacturing projects to be approved within 2 working days. And this team, as I mentioned earlier, the implementation, the team which I mentioned, Post-Invest, this team will be also, another team will be formed to facilitate speedy implementation of manufacturing projects. And why is this necessary? During the lockdown, many approvals, many companies have received their approvals, but they couldn't move forward because of the lockdown. So this team will be taking them through, you know, for all the various approvals at state level or at federal level, so that, you know, they implement this project as per their plans. So now I'll talk on another subject, that's the Industry 4.0 facilitation. Actually, Malaysia is quite big on this Industry 4.0 facilitation. Back in 2018, October, the government announced a national policy, which is known as Industry Forward, mainly to encourage the adoption of automation and digitalization in the business processes. So we are really going all out to encourage companies to leverage on the various incentives and facilities offered to embrace Industry 4.0. So these are the snapshot of the incentives and grants available. So let me just take you through a bit, like some places when you have this word Industry Forward, these are government funded programs. So in Industry Forward Readiness Assessment, the government funds the readiness assessment. Is worth about 27,000. So SMEs, about we are trying to assess about 500 SMEs to see their readiness. So it costs about 27,000. So the SMEs are funded by government, and those others who are not SMEs, they can also come on board and do this readiness assessment, and the amount can be given tax deduction. Okay, and for companies who have done the readiness assessment, and if they are ready but they have some funding issues, we have this intervention fund where about Ringgit Malaysia 500,000 will be given for each company on a matching basis. So this is another effort. And for companies who could not avail themselves to this funding because of their size, you see, they can always come into domestic investment strategic fund and high impact fund. Domestic is for domestic, high impact is given for even 100% foreign companies, where we have actually expanded this. We have actually extended this to companies. This is actually an existing scheme, but we are giving more, like domestic matching 50-50, but if they have Industry 4.0 or if they are found to be ready, we can give 60-40, 60 by government, 40 they bear the cost. And high impact fund, in the past we only gave for R&D and training, but now we can give if they even have modernization and there's elements of Industry 4.0 or automation. Okay, talking about automation, we have this automation capital allowance. This is actually an initiative that we had since 2018, and it will be there till 2023. So this is actually an effort to move companies away from labor intensiveness. So we are giving about 200% capital allowance for companies which are labor intensive on their first 4 million capital, qualifying capital. And for other industries, we give for the first 2 million capital expenditure. This is an initiative to automate the industries. And many companies have come to us and have gotten this incentive. And for details, please feel free to communicate with MIDA Singapore or, you know, our websites. Okay, the Smart Automation Grant is another initiative announced under the budget 2020, whereby about 2 million ringgit Malaysia will be awarded to about 1,000 manufacturing and 1,000 services companies who are going to adopt technology to automate and embrace Industry 4.0. Similarly, this Digital Transformation Acceleration Program is also another form of matching grant given for companies who want to leverage on Digital Transformation Lab, where we have some companies on board like Bosch and Rainmaking and so on. So if they leverage on the competency of these companies, we can support the companies on a matching basis. Okay, and about incentive, there's another incentive on vendor development program. These are for anchor companies who are developing the skills of the vendors. And when the anchor company develops the skill and they incur OPEX due to that effort, the OPEX up to 1 million can be given a deduction, double deduction for a period of 3 years. And the next one is a special incentive for E&E announced in budget 2020. And usually E&E industry is given good incentive, but if they have, projects are coming with high value added and high tech, this special incentive is aimed at giving 100% tax waiver for a period of 10 years. So you notice that there's so much of tax incentive that's available in Malaysia, and do consider that. Okay, and this is another industry digitalization transformation fund via Bank Pembangunan Malaysia, which companies can get at a subsidized rate, the interest rate of 2% for soft loan. And this business loan guarantee scheme, on the other hand, allows company to get government guarantee on 70% of their loan. Okay, so having said that, we have launched a Lighthouse project in Malaysia. Actually, this Lighthouse projects initiative is also to drive the industry forward initiatives, and those companies who are interested to know more about this, and if you have your capabilities in Industry 4.0, please do follow the, do come into this link, and there's a team in MIDA HQ from the Advanced Technology and R&D team, which can have communications with you and actually guide you through. So this Lighthouse project is just as how the concept is Lighthouse, you know, it provides the beacon for other companies. So the concept was coined during Global World Economic Forum, and some of the Southeast Asian companies selected for this are Micron, Infineon, and PetroC. And Micron and Infineon, they have operations in Malaysia too. Okay, in conclusion, I will leave you with this slide to let you know that we had always had good international standings in terms of being the most attractive emerging market in Asia, and you know, the ranking by World Bank in doing business, in protecting investors. And you know, this chart here shows that, you know, actually we are standing tall among developed countries, you know, as one of the countries which exports high technology, and it clearly goes to show that, you know, we are ready for this high-tech industry. And World Bank has some good words about Malaysia being more resilient than other countries, as we have a more diversified economic structure and sound track record of macroeconomic management. And also International Monetary Fund mentioning about the possibility of our real gross GDP to grow at a rate of 9%. And let's see how it works, because there's so much of effort going into that. And by having your operations in Malaysia, we have signed 14 free trade agreements, and it's actually a springboard for you to reach out to a market of 3.9 billion populations. And in ASEAN itself, you know, some of these free trade agreements includes ASEAN agreements. About 99% of the products are already zero tariff. So MIDA is now on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please follow us on our social media for real-time updates and information on the investment landscape of Malaysia. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. And now I would like to pass over to Tiffany. Thanks, Tiffany.
Okay, and thank you, Marani. Thank you so much for the presentation. For those who have questions for Wuma, please, feel free to click on the Q&A button below and key in your questions. And if you have seen any other participants who post similar questions that is of your liking or preference, please click on the upvote like button so that the moderator will know that these are the questions that the participants are interested for the speakers to address on later on. So without further ado, now we'd like to invite our third speaker for today, Mr. Sajur Jaya Riwaran Muhammad Yunus, who is the director of MIDA Johor. He'll be sharing more about the overview of the investments outlook, opportunities, and current development in Johor. So over to you, Sajur.
Hi, thank you very much, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. So I hope that being the last speaker, always we keep up the best for the last. Anyway, first of all, I would like to thank to SCCCI as well as to our colleague from MIDA Singapore for inviting us from MIDA Johor in terms of for us to share with all of you in terms of the investment opportunities in state of Johor. Well, Johor is not alien to most of the Singaporeans, and we also share similar or some cultures, business, and as well as social relationship. Okay. All right. So basically, today I will be sharing about a little bit about Johor, something about economic development, as well as what kind of enablers, catalytic project, and also the future direction or initiative from the state of Johor. So basically, as mentioned by Dr. Chua and also Ms. Baradi, we have see a lot of numbers. But again, overall, the economic through the GDP indicator estimated that the state of economy would be contracted 0.5% to 1.5%. Generally, Johor's GDP will contract more than national rates. This is due to the dynamic dependence of the state's economy on Singapore. With two economic corridors, namely the Iskandar Development Region (IRDA) and also the East Coast Economic Region (ECER), the state of Johor aims to emerge as a regional economic power with a sustainable and also dynamic and comprehensive development strategy. So as you can see that actually currently Iskandar Malaysia Development Region encompasses an area of more than 2,200 square kilometers, which is 3 times of the size of Singapore and 2 times of the size of Hong Kong. And as you are aware that Iskandar Malaysia also region will be extended to include parts of Kota Tinggi, Kluang, and also Pontian for land development as well as modern agriculture. So basically under the IRDA's authority, so there is a plan to expand and also to promote more land development at the affordable cost, at the same time also to bring modern agriculture as one of its new promoted sectors. So generally, if you look at the transformation of Johor economic structure, basically services and manufacturing dominate most of the economic structure in Johor. However, if you can see that over the time, there is an increase on the construction as well as agriculture, mainly due to food security as well as the announcement of some major infrastructure project. So Johor itself, why is Johor? I think for Singapore, as a neighboring country or adjacent, close proximity to Singapore, Johor itself complement in terms of cost. Cost is very one of the factors that you can see Singapore can leverage, as well as the network accessibility, the international direct flight, where through Johor you can have access through Senai and also the Changi Airport. In addition, also there is availability of land and also the so-called cluster of industrial park available for industry or for investor to explore as well as to invest in Johor. In addition, also there is access to ports and also the highway connectivity. So basically, in terms of the, you can see that Johor itself have the 10 districts. Each regional or areas also can be represented based on the strength of the economic sector. Most of the southern part of Johor, you can see that the major industries are concentrated, focused on international trade, and also the financial hub, health services, logistic hub, ecotourism, and also this so-called fisheries and maritime activities. On the other, the east part of Johor and also northeast, Mersing is known as ecotourism, and Kota Tinggi also, there's a big project there called oil and gas and main food manufacturing. And for the west coast of Johor, most of the industries are concentrated on the furniture, education hub, as well as the agriculture. So in short, if you can see that even though that manufacturing and services represent a big chunk of the Johor's economy, but in the future, agriculture will be one of the main agenda or main focus to achieve so-called food security. Together with our partners, with the stakeholders in Johor, we believe that we could bring more achievement to Johor's economy. So in terms of the investment in Johor, Johor has registered for 6 consecutive years from 2013 up to 2018. Johor was the highest recipient of approved investment in manufacturing sectors, mainly due to this big mega project, especially in the oil and gas and petrochemical industries. So in terms of the by country, as you can see that Singapore is the main contributor, and followed by other countries like Netherlands, Japan, and USA. Among the companies also have been touched by earlier speakers. This is an example of some Singaporean companies in Johor, mainly in the electrical and electronics sectors, and also in the medical technology, as well as food and food industry. So this through this investment, more than 49.6 billion has been approved, which in terms of numbers of projects is more than 2,900 projects has been approved. And as you can see in that, a big chunk of the sectors approved were electrical and electronics, followed by fabricated metal products, and also chemical and chemical products. So if you look at the what is infrastructure available in Johor, in fact, this is just give you some idea, and this list is non-exhaustive list for industrial park. Investors have options to explore whether to identify their location anywhere in Johor. And if you can see that most of the industrial park or estates concentrated at the southern of Johor. However, there are also other opportunities that investor can explore other areas in the northern part or other parts of Johor, due to maybe because of the supply chain or accessibility or availability of raw materials. So this is an example of private developer in Johor, and some of these private, actually this is not, based on our, unofficially there are no less than 100 industrial park in Iskandar Malaysia itself. So among other things that this industrial park is a Senai Airport City, which is located with one of the readiness is the free industrial zone or free commercial zone. With this Senai Airport City, it has more than 2,700 acres of land available and connected with the major highways, seaport, as well as international airports. The next one is Nusa Jaya Tech Park, which is a joint venture project between Singapore developer and also Malaysia. And this is another thing which is close to PTP and the second link, and also has several what called up-to-date and also several facilities available for. On the other industrial park is from the local is iPark, which is one of the Malaysian main developer for industrial resort, and it also provide comprehensive facilities for investors. So basically, for investors, if you're looking for the location or a base for them to set up a factory, there are many options available, not only through the so-called private developer, but also through the so-called local state GLCs. And this is to indicate that beside the infrastructure on the industrial park, Johor also can offer in terms of the education center ecosystem. This is through this three main cluster education system center in Johor, which if you can see that we have three main cluster. One is in Johor Pagoh Education Hub, EduCity at the southern part of the Johor, as well as the so-called Setia Alam Education City. So this is an example of the education or private university available in Johor. So what are these catalytic projects available in Johor? So if you see that, as you are aware that the Johor Pengarang Integrated Petroleum Complex is one of the major projects in Johor. So this mega petrochemical project worth a value of investment $27 billion US, and currently about 42% from this 22,000 acres of land has been used for phase 1. And this is in line with the PIPC master plan. So there are many opportunities available for investors to explore. Among that opportunities that are available that investor can explore is so-called small and medium enterprises activities, workshop, fabrication yard. This is something that ecosystem that is ready for the investor to explore. Another thing is a Kulai Iskandar Data Exchange. This is the so-called one of the catalytic project. To date, there are 745 acres to be developed as a global hub for cloud content and services. And there is one project currently being developed in Kulai Iskandar Data Exchange. And as you can see that in Singapore, there are many data exchange operators. And one of the big challenge is how to get land, space, and also energy. So for the solution for data centers, not only in Singapore, but elsewhere in the world, PDEX also can offer land in terms of land, space, and also the future energy requirement. Again, next, another development is a Muar Furniture Park. Furniture industry is a synonym with Johor, particularly in Muar district. Johor itself is one of the main producer of Malaysia's furniture, which is 65% of national furniture products in 2017. So most of the this furniture product is manufactured in Muar district itself. And Malaysia also is listed in one of the top 10 exporters in the world. And these furniture products were exported to more than 160 countries. So basically the main importer for this product are USA, Japan, Australia, Singapore, and also some from the EU countries. So the state government is committed to sustain a rapid growth of the furniture industry in Muar through relocation initiative where these factories will be placed in one integrated and well-planned industrial area. So the state government has come up with this Muar Furniture Park as an integrated furniture park. The next development is a Pagoh Education Hub, where Johor implemented this private fund initiative as a Sandabi is one of the SPV which has been given to design the Pagoh Education Hub, according to the specification defined by the government to build and set up the facilities and also to maintain the buildings with financing borne by the concessionaire. So the concession agreement for the 4 components of the project, namely polytechnic, and also the shared facilities, UTHM, IIUM, and also UTM. And this was signed in 2012. So basically, this will involve the development of an area of 4,000 acres. And the first phase of land involved the development of 4 institutions of higher learning, such as University of Tun Hussein On, International Islamic University of Malaysia, the University of Technology Malaysia, and also the Polytech of Tun Syed Nasir. In addition, this Pagoh Education Hub also will be equipped with the centralized shared facilities and the water district cooling system in all buildings. So development of this hub is also a concept of a cluster by institution, taking into account the centralized shared facilities. So this is another development in Iskandar, Malaysia. 5 zone has been designated in Iskandar, Malaysia, and previously under Malaysian budget, the government has announced that IRDA will be double its size up to the Kluang, Kota Tinggi, and Pontian. So formerly, Iskandar Puteri is actually formerly known as a Nusa Jaya, with the available land of 22,000 acres, and this is a new administrative center of Johor and the focal point of Iskandar, Malaysia. Under these areas of development, IIB or Iskandar Malaysia Berhad, also together with the UAM Sunrise, is a major developer in this area and also responsible to develop a catalytic project in terms of residential, commercial, and also industrial. Among others, facilities available in this area is Iskandar Space, which is a co-working space concept that was introduced by Iskandar Investment Berhad as a catalytic project in Iskandar Puteri as a good place to live, to work, and also play. In addition, also the Academy of e-sport is an initiative done by Iskandar Investment Berhad to train and also to nurture e-sport players in Johor. Also, this is another so-called a unique master plan for Iskandar Puteri. So, as you can see that Iskandar Malaysia is also promoting a smart and green township in its development. Among these so-called elements that looking is a green economy in terms of community, environment, and also inclusive of safety, connectivity, and also livable and efficiency. So in addition also, in terms of the development of Medini, there are about more than 2,200 acres of land available for Medini, and this is mainly for the commercial and services. We have previously we have seen about this the facilities, but in terms of education, we have touched a little bit about those cluster in the northern part and also certain parts of the Johor. But for EduCity is one of the first ASEA's concept of multi-varsity complex that consists of 7 higher education institutions and 2 international schools. So basically, the area covers about 300 acres, and to date, it's around 750 million investment has been realized. So this is a so-called the areas of plot which is the current private higher education institution that were present in this EduCity. So example as Raffles University and international schools, Marlborough College. This is among some of the colleges available in EduCity, plus the higher education such as Southampton Engineering, Netherlands Maritime Institute, and also Malaysian Multimedia University. This is among a local university which is focused on cinematic art. So in terms of Newcastle University also offers a so-called medicine course, and University of Reading which offers business and administration cost. So the other development or the other so-called services promoted in this area is a virtual reality center of excellence. This center of excellence for virtual realities is a project between a JV project between the Iskandar Investment Berhad and also with the KT Corporation Korea, which focus on 4 main core: education, e-sport, marketplace, and for software development, as well as research and development. So talking about the halal, actually there's another areas that investor can look in terms of availability of Iskandar Halal Park. As you can see that with the market more than 2 billion ringgit, and in fact 50% of the Muslim market is within this region, Southeast Asia region. And by having this present in Malaysia, especially in Johor, there are ample opportunities for investors to market their halal products, not only the products, but also their services through Malaysia's networking. So example of one industrial park available is Iskandar Halal Park, which focus on halal related business. And this is Halma's aggregation is by Halal Development Corporation. Beside that, there are incentives as well available to encourage industries to locate within this halal park. Among the focus area is cosmetic and personal care services, which is involved logistics, tourism, healthcare, ingredients, nutraceuticals, pharmaceutical, and also special ingredient process. This is some, I think earlier on, Ms. Umarani has touched about major companies in Malaysia, but specifically in Johor, we have several companies, major project companies, especially those located within the private or within this JLC's industrial park. And among of this, they create an ecosystem, especially in the petrochemical and chemical industry. So I think towards the end, Ms. Umarani also have shared with you some of the incentives available. So I won't go through again with this in detail, but if you need any further details about this incentive, you may also go to our website for more details. And this is just actually in terms of doing business, the list can come can be through our stakeholders or through MIDA. So you have opportunities to start with the inquiries, or some of you maybe have the business relationship or to continue with your partner in Malaysia. So we can provide assistance and also facilitation through our office in Singapore, and in Johor. We also can provide assistance and facilitation with our through our stakeholders such as Invest Johor. Okay, so this will be the next so-called what will be the initiative in Johor. Recently, the Chief Minister of Johor has announced 7 key initiatives to tackle COVID-19 for the states. And the first proposal is to establish of the Ibrahim Johor Economic Council. This IJEC is one of the initiatives which is the state of Johor needs the best brain to provide short, medium, and long-term solution to restore the economy. The Economic Council also will recommend solutions to certain issues, and for example, efforts to create jobs, opportunity, as well as how Johor can take advantage on the China-US trade war. So basically, this trade war led many of the large enterprises to relocate their business out of China. But if this is more on local, but if you look at the neighbor, Singapore also can tap or leverage Johor as their future expansion. So under this IJEC Council or Economic Council, the recommendation will be translated into future policies and the practices of the state economy. Also, the Economic Council will be joined by several prominent figures from the private as well as from the from the public sectors. Accordingly, the second aim is to make Johor Digital Master Plan a success. So digitalization is one of the big things to move forward. The state of Johor, in collaboration with the private sector, will under this what called master plan, it will empower the relevant stakeholders to ensure that the digital capabilities are comparable with the developed countries. So the internet access and the access to information is one of the significant and also very important things for state of Johor to develop this digitalization. The goal of this master plan is to create a digital bank. The state of government is in the early stage of forming a partnership with Bank Rakyat to realize the existence of this digital bank. In addition, the Johor Structure Plan 2030 or Johor Singapore Johor Real Growth Triangle, in short CJOCAPRI, is said to improve the regional economy. What's more is in the current context, CJOCAPRI is well suited for redevelopment. This is due to this post-COVID-19 trade partnership, which is now focused on regional instead of global. So the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in several countries of the world has led to the globalization. However, the world is still closed and the trade activity is minimal. So technically, we are running about 90% of the economy. Because the third aim of this is to revitalize the Singapore Johor Riau Growth Triangle or CJOCAPRI, is to strive to make this tripartite treaty to come back and also to improve further the partnership. The fourth shareholder is the Johor Investment Company in Singapore, or JICO. The existence of JICO office in Singapore aims to give Johor civil service exposure to administrative and also to improve other skills. JCS will be sent to the office for an appropriate period to increase their potential and also to facilitate trade and investment efforts between Johor and Singapore. The fifth criterion is the new economic alignment. The new economic potential of the West Coast should be rebuilt. Johor is obliged to take advantage of the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail, as well as a station passing through Muar Batu Pahat and Iskandar Puteri. So with smooth human mobility, especially through also connected to Singapore, this will give a spillover effect to those satellite stations and area. Primary economic sectors such as agriculture and also emerging economies such as financial services. And last, the sixth initiative is the Johor Food Bank Initiative, where the aim is Johor plan to export food products to overseas. Like Singapore and United Arab Emirates, Johor also needs to increase its capacity to provide food for its own use. And also this initiative will also focus heavily on the development of more modern and also modern agriculture sector. By taking advantage of the state's complete and connected infrastructure, so this is agriculture becomes a main and also important sector in the future. And the last the seventh initiative is the Johor Sustainable Development Plan 2019-2030. This plan actually is currently is the plan is the sixth proposal above a form of intervention and implementation into the Johor Sustainable Development Plan. So the development plan will be adopted and implemented in collaboration with all stakeholders, including the agencies and also related departments. So in short, the Johor Sustainable Development Plan is based on the 8 trusts. And as you can see that how to empower economic of power is one of the main, including the social and also other investment of digital economy. so much. There are many things that in Johor that need to be collaboration and also a joint effort between the not only from the government, federal or state, but also the private sector as a main driver to develop Johor's state economies. So if you have any further clarification or any questions about doing business in Johor and what will be the opportunities available, please do not hesitate to contact us at Johor office, and we are happy to also to answer any of your inquiries or question at the end. Thank you very much. I pass over to Tiffany. Thank you.
Okay, so now for the before we start off with the Q&A session, for those of you who would like to receive the presentation deck, please take some time to scan on the QR code on the screen right now to fill up a short survey. And after you have completed the form, the presentation deck will be sent to you in a few days later after editing is done. Now, I understand some of the participants here may be using your mobile phone to be, viewing the whole presentation, so you may have issues on scanning the QR code. But rest assured, for SCCCI here, we'll be sending off the link and the QR code itself to guide the participants on how to retrieve the presentation deck moving forward again. So now let us welcome back our three speakers for the Q&A session. And we are happy to have today to have with us Mr. Mark Leong, Head of SME Banking in Maybank, Singapore. He'll be joining us as the moderator for the Q&A session as well. So if you have any questions for our speaker, feel free to submit them by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions. Do note that as we have limited number of time for the Q&A sessions, we will not be able to answer all questions. Thus, we seek your kind understanding that should you have any questions not to be able to answer during this session, please contact MIDA and Maybank directly with their contact details featured on the screen, or email SCCCI and we will forward your enquiries to them too. So without further ado, I'll pass off, to Mark to moderate on for the Q&A session today. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Tiffany. So what we do is that we have got quite a fair bit of questions, but let us go around to the more popular questions out there. I think the first that we see is that a question around the LSS at Mentari. This is the large-scale solar project at Mentari. So this is about the prospects of renewable energy, solar and biomass power development in Malaysia, right? SG investors looking to invest in Malaysia energy sector. So this is a kind of a question from the participants about the interest of Singapore companies, as the government has recently announced the large-scale solar at Mentari utility scale project, reaching out the goals of 20% electricity generation, right? This is about 1,000 megawatts, I think. I think maybe this question I can tune it to Umar first to share a little bit on this. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, that's an interesting question, actually. This LSS project was announced somewhere last year, and it's a long-term project. For sure it's going on, but you know that there were many things that happened in between, so we need to really follow up on what's the status right now on this LSS project. But generally, renewable energy projects, they belong to the promoted industry in Malaysia, and it's a sector that we would like to see more investors. So I can revert back to the Singapore investor who's interested in this project.
Okay.
Okay. Shah, anything?
Can I add? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Marani. Okay. For the renewable energy sector in Malaysia, as you are aware that large-scale solar is one of the initiatives to promote this renewable energy. And under this LSS project, investors are advised to join or participate in so-called bidding process through the Suruhanjaya Tenaga or Energy Commission. Beside this LSS project, which is focused on the large-scale solar, the other initiative that investors can explore is through the feed-in tariff scheme. The feed-in tariff scheme, which is under the purview of SEDA, Sustainable Energy Development Authority, or SEDA, there's another scheme we call feed-in tariff, also through bidding process, and available for other sources such as biomass, biogas, and also mini hydro. So in fact, in detail, so you can explore through the Energy Commission or SEDA website for more details in terms of the bidding and also bidding process. So besides of this so-called selling to the grid, other initiative that for the current investor or existing investor in Malaysia, they also can invest renewable energy for own consumption, which is not for the selling to the grid, but also they can reduce the energy by having this renewable energy generation using a solar, or they can use other sort of other renewable energy sources such as biomass, biogas for their own consumption. So for more details, you can explore further with the SEDA or Energy Commission website in details. And in fact, there are many system integrator available which can advise investor should they are interested to invest in this renewable energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Shah. Thanks, Umar. So the next question, I guess, goes up to Adil Hadbin here. So Hadbin, you spoke a bit about the tourism, hospitality, and the MICE industry just now, talking about the recovery will be very slow. Even Q3, Q4, we won't see much recovery. But fortunately, Malaysia has a nice domestic market, right, which can kind of help out a little bit. But the question here is on, besides this too, what about the retail segment of things, the retail malls and the REITs? How is this filling out, and how is it looking at the next 2 quarters?
Yeah, I think the traffic to the malls will improve a lot faster than the recovery in the recreation, the hospitality, the air travel side. There are still limits, in terms of the traffic, because there are all the social distance requirements, and of course the restaurants and all that, it'll still be at probably half capacity rather than full. But I think when you look across all the countries that ease the lockdowns, people do want to get back to their regular life and want to catch up with their friends. So I think generally the sense that the recovery should be, I think at a decent pace in the retail. There's also some interesting patterns in the spending, because it does show that certain even in Korea and China, people were kind of astonished about the revenge spending for some of the luxury goods, leather handbags and so on, that picked up quite strongly. So so I think definitely the retail REITs and all that should do better than the hospitality REITs.
Yeah, and you did also mention about the resilience of certain bigger cities like KL and JB that will probably recover a lot faster. So yeah, is this true?
Yeah.
Compared to, say, the smaller towns and everything?
So I think it's quite interesting when you look at Google and Apple mobility, and not surprisingly, the recovery in traffic is the weakest in the more tourism-dependent towns. So when you have Jakarta versus Bali, Bali is clearly lagging, and same with Phuket, right? So it depends really how dependent you are on the tourism side. But yeah, in the major cities where life is going back to work, then clearly the recovery is faster. It also depends on the country, because for example, Philippines has just imposed a lockdown again in Metro Manila, right, and also in Davao because of an outbreak. So then the traffic gets hit. I think going forward, I think we sense that there is a lockdown fatigue, that even countries that have a high daily cases cannot take it anymore, right? Because the economic cost, the psychological cost, the political cost is huge. And most countries don't have the kind of reserves that Singapore has to keep extending it. So the pain is quite real, and people are losing their livelihood. So like it or not, I don't think we'll go back to the full lockdowns. We'll probably go to more targeted or localized lockdowns and allow the economy to breathe again. But it means there will be higher deaths and higher rate of infections and cases, right? So I think that's the trade-off.
Okay. Thanks, Admin, for that. So there's also a bunch of questions on this travel restrictions. Excuse me, talk about travel bubbles between Malaysia and Singapore. We talk about the tourism movements, the worker and labor movements between the two countries. Pre and post-COVID, this has been a big issue. And of course, right now we have not yet kind of free up that movement of space between the two countries. So there's a question around what would the two governments what likely will the two governments be doing, and what are the things that both governments can do, Malaysia, Singapore government can do to kind of help to ease things going forward if there is to be a wave 2, wave 3 of the COVID-19. So maybe I can throw it to Umar, even to Shah, to help out with this question.
Maybe I can just help out a bit. I think they are helping gradually. Today we heard another good news. Earlier they were saying expatriates of employment pass, they need a written approval from, they need an approval from Immigration Department. But today there's an announcement which came that employment pass holders EP1, where their income is RM 10,000 and above and 5 years of experience group, their dependent need not get written approval. So basically how we are seeing this is both sides are trying their best, both sides, the governments are trying their best. It's in a good intention, with a good intention that we want to see the movement back, because movement back also means that the economy is back, you see. But at the same time, we have this issue of, the risk of the transmission and second wave and so on. So we are currently, it's moving towards, because both sides, Malaysia is also doing quite well. And Malaysia has recognized Singapore as a green zone, one of the green zone countries, Singapore, Brunei, and Australia and New Zealand. So we look at it positively. It looks like it's moving step by step, so hopefully we can see a resume of the travel. So far, Malaysia has given 31st August 2020 as the date where we should see some light at the end of the tunnel. But in between, there are a lot of adjustments that's being done and improvements being done to facilitate people.
Maybe I can just add on to Umarani. I think the negotiations is ongoing, right, as discussed. But I think it's hard to believe that there will be a big bang relaxation, because there are 300,000, Malaysians that cross over from Johor to Singapore, on a daily basis, right? So that's a high risk. So I think there will be some kind of a COVID testing, and also probably some kind of social tracing, contact tracing app, that will be launched. So I believe that there will be some kind of limits on the numbers that can cross, and that's going to be a lot of friction, which means that the typical flow that we saw will take a while, to be fully restored. So it will resume, but I don't think one can realistically expect it to go back to the 300,000 a day kind of numbers that we saw pre-COVID.
Shah, anything from you, Shah? How are you going to get more Singaporeans to cross the border to put money in your home?
Okay. Actually, I believe these investors in Singapore, I believe they have partners in Johor. So the best thing is at the moment we can get in touch to technologies, but there are certain things that there are requires they are present in Johor. That's another challenge actually. I think from the Johor side, actually the big concern is especially for Johorian actually the impact for these Johorian workers which work in Singapore. But for investors, I believe the way forward is we look at how we can see a way to assist this investor to finalize their so-called certain, for example, like they have to sign for their purchase of land. These things are very also is a hindrance, not hindrance due to this COVID or restriction of movement. It also delay in terms of inward investment, especially to Johor. So in fact, it's not limited to Singaporean investor, but also we have from the Chinese investor and also other parts of other countries. So at the moment, based on the current guidelines given by the immigration, so we have to advise accordingly, and also we need to really look at the concern, the safety first, and also must be a mutual and reciprocal between the two countries. So I don't want to comment more because most of the actually is based on the government, any government announcements by the government. But from the state of Johor, the concern is, I mean, how to facilitate this investor and to come in, and also to how they can finalize their investment in Johor. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Shah, Umar. So the next question is revolving around, I think that there's a few likes of this question. The new policies and incentives that we just talked about just now by both Umar and Shah are applicable to companies already registered with their Sdn Bhd entities. This is around companies, or even Singapore companies that have been around in Malaysia for a long time with their Sdn Bhd, as well as there's a question on single companies who recently invested in a Sdn Bhd, right, that has been around for a long time. So a local Malaysian company, 10, 20, 25 years already. Now we have new capital injection from a Singapore company. So can we expand on some of the incentives and policy that are still applicable to them?
Yeah. Okay, if they are referring to the incentive that we announced recently as the short-term plan, the restart incentive, yes, it's open to even existing companies. As I mentioned earlier, if it's a new company, they enjoy zero tax rate. And if it's an existing company, they enjoy the ITA. So I have explained that they can enjoy. The existing companies are also, as long as they bring in the capital into the country of 300 million to 500 million for existing company above 300 million. When they enjoy the ITA, we can consider them. So basically, this is a bold move, you know, by the government. At this point of time, we had to give this kind of incentive to attract the investment into the country. So if it's an existing project and they are going to relocate some of their operations, like maybe, you know, they are going to bring it from another country, or as long as the investment, capital investment is in that range, we will consider.
Okay. So there's also a question around maybe we take the last two questions, yeah. Something on the education sector, something about online, the ease of investing in online setup in Malaysia. Maybe either Shah or Omar can take this question.
Yeah. The online sector, actually, we have given the answer to them. Basically, I think Shah would have a better, I'll just explain the policy for education sector in Malaysia. There's a moratorium right now until December 2020. We do not approve new licenses for universities and colleges, and but we do give approvals if it is located in Iskandar, and if it's one of the top 10 world ranking universities. Having said that, if there are some good projects that comes to us, we can discuss with the Ministry of Education. But these are the current policy on education. Maybe Shah, you can, since you spoke a lot on Shazul, you spoke a lot on education, you know, in Johor. I pass it over to Shah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Morani. So actually, for the education hub, technically, basically there are the opportunities. There are opportunities for this education opportunities in Johor. So roughly, especially on the Pakoh side, where currently is the area has been intensively to be developed, and for the with the current pandemic and outbreak, so the government basically they have to look. I mean, how to so-called to. There's another area, so-called the online education. There's another thing that with this pandemic happens, the system of the education system might be, there is a evolution where online so-called online education has become very important. So at the moment, in terms of the what call this education, some of the current university they now are looking at the what kind of subject or subject that which they can offer for the future course. And in terms of the the development of the infrastructure, there are the availability of the land is there, but somehow is how this the currently in terms of the capital or either through collaboration. That's another thing that I mean the investor need to explore further with these relevant departments. So in fact, at the moment I don't have any answers, but I would happy that maybe later on we can share later. Maybe if you we can find out more, and perhaps later we can share with those who did further clarification. We are happy to share that later. All right.
Mark, if I may, can I come in? You see, on the online education, they must get approval from Ministry of Education for the syllabus. That is compulsory, even if they are going to offer online. I just want to add on to what Shazul has said. Thanks.
Okay, so thanks, Umar and Shah. So let's end this session with a question, because we have an economist in the house. So Harbin is always very insightful. Let's talk about. Let's end it with we talked a lot about the various governments in ASEAN all pumping in money into the economy. We're talking about very aggressive fiscal pump priming. We talk about interest rate cuts. Now, what will that do or mean for ringgit, the currency, vis-a-vis US, vis-a-vis Sing?
Right. I think we find that most of the trade sensitive ASEAN currencies, including ringgit, Sing, Thai baht, hinges on the global recovery, on the global Asian export recovery. So if you believe that that with the lockdowns being eased now, that global trade and global growth is going to be recovering, and we're past the worst, and there's no risk of a second wave, then chances are the ringgit is probably going to gradually appreciate from here on. And it's past the worst, especially since some of the major export items like the energy, the oil and gas, and so on hinges on life going back to normal, right? And therefore the demand for energy will also increase, supporting oil prices, supporting the ringgit. So that's our largely prevailing view, that we will expect a slight appreciation in the ringgit, but largely next year. That the ringgit will probably be around these levels for this year. Of course, if things don't turn out that way, then unfortunately that's hard to predict. We're not really scientists, and there is a wave of second outbreak, and then more and more countries have to broaden the extent of lockdowns. There could be a pullback in economic activity, and again, the ringgit could weaken, and especially if the governments are forced to pump in even more money, increase the fiscal deficit. The central banks are forced to cut rates by even more, have bigger QEs, then I think there will be some pressure on the ringgit. But our baseline view is that there will be a slight appreciation of ringgit largely next year.
Okay. Thanks, Harbin. So, okay, we come to the end of, I guess, our moderation session on Q&A. I'm going to get Tiffany come back to close off the session. Tiffany, over back to you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your participation, and a big thank you to Haping, Umarani, Shazul, and Mark for their time and valuable sharing today. We hope that the participants have benefited a lot from the webinar session. And before we end off, we would also like to invite all the participants to fill out this form, this feedback form, once you leave the webinar session. So upon clicking on the exit button, for all the participants, you should be able to link to this Zoom link itself. Please assist to fill up this participation form. It's via Google form itself, so that Singapore Chinese Chamber is able to do much better events catered to your needs in future. So without further ado, we look forward to seeing you again in our future events. Stay safe and healthy, and thank you and goodbye. Thank you everyone.